Hey everybody, welcome back to OTT Executive Podcast. I'm thrilled today to have Evan Shapiro, who, as you might know, was my first podcast last year around this time in 2022. Looks like he'll be my last podcast of 2023. So welcome, Evan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing
And
great.
by the way, I would like to say you know me better than most other podcast hosts who do not pronounce my name correctly.
Shapiro, yes, of course. I will not make that mistake again. But thank you so much for carving out the time. I know you've had a busy year,
Sure.
and it's been a crazy year in 2023. I don't want to spend too much time kind of looking back. I know you're just came out with your predictions for 2024, so I kind of wanted to focus on that. But first of all, quick introductions for like the 1% of my audience that maybe not doesn't know you yet.
My name is Evan Shapiro, pronounced correctly. I'm from Philadelphia. Go Birds. And people call me the media universe cartographer, mostly because I tell them to. I am a recovering television executive. I ran IFC and Sundance. For the last 7 years, I've been out on my own writing about the media universe on my Substack, Media War and Peace. On LinkedIn, I've been pontificating about the media universe, and I also speak about the media universe at conferences and for companies, and I consult through my agency eShap about outsource strategy and all things media.
Yes, awesome. And you were a keynote in the past for my OTT Executive Summit, which we just had last year,
I
pivoting to
think an
virtual.
award-winning keynote. I think I
You were,
was
yeah, well,
I won the
for the
Big
record,
Brain, the Big
O-
Brain Award or something like that.
OTT Genius,
Yes, that's
the G
exactly.
word. Yeah, you were one of the original OG geniuses, and before that, you gave a keynote when you were NBCU Digital. So we've known each other for a long time, and I'm a big fan. Folks, check out a Substack. Everybody's got the PowerPoints with the planets, with the universes, and it's constantly changing.
Well,
So
I just dropped the last map of 2023. And I think you wanted me to maybe recap what happened in 2023.
yeah.
And I think, you look at that map and you look at the map that the last map I made last year and the first map I made this year, and it tells a big part of the story. The first thing is that the big media Death Stars have only solidified their
Mhm.
power in the media ecosystem. Microsoft now owns Activision. Apple's services business is really the only part of their company that's truly growing.
Mhm.
Meta has rediscovered its power in the ad economy, as has Google. And as a consequence, those companies, by the way, Amazon kind of controls almost, every part of the
Yeah.
media ecosystem, a major supplier of connected televisions in the United States and regions around the world, a massive, if not the most popular paid streaming video
Mhm.
service, a massive free video streaming service called Twitch, huge, obviously, in commerce, cloud, and advertising. And in fact, the three largest digital media companies, the three largest big
Mhm.
tech Death Stars, Google, Meta, and Amazon, now control about 60% of all advertising, not digital
Wow.
advertising, all advertising in the US. So that is a big part of it. And what's interesting is they are now all at a high point in their market valuations. Apple is now worth more than any company ever has been, and more than it ever was since I started tracking. Same thing with Microsoft, who's the second most valuable company in all of media. High point in their valuation. Alphabet and Amazon are near theirs, as is Meta. As Nvidia is now worth
Mhm.
5 times what it was when I first started tracking in the map 4 years ago. So that those Death Stars have consolidated their power, and a large part of that has to do with what happened during the upfronts and the new fronts
Mhm.
in 2024, 2023. More importance on performance,
Mhm.
which is the specialty of Google, Amazon, and Meta. More concentration on big data and retail media. Again,
Mhm.
going back to those big three. Money moving out of the upfront, not because of the economy, but because of the ability to be flexible
Mhm.
around performance marketing. We emerged from an ad recession finally at some point over the course of the last quarter. But the money is not going to where it was in 2019 or 2020 or 2021. It's going to much more digital growth in digital this year. Traditional shrank. Same thing will happen next year. So the ad economy changed dramatically and forever in 2023. And then lastly, I think what you're seeing is the disintegration of the single media publisher companies.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from Spotify to Disney and in between. And it's going to be increasingly difficult. This was the year where all the big tech companies got into sports in a huge way.
Yeah.
Amazon and football, YouTube and Google and football, Apple with soccer, a huge deal with Messi, game-changing deal with Messi, and with baseball. And that shift of in sports and in television is going to be have massive ripple effects across the rest of the media universe. The single media players are realizing that they have lost to the big tech suppliers who do more than media. Apple does devices and services. Microsoft does gaming and enterprise. Amazon does everything. Google does video and music and gaming and operating systems inside mobile and connected television. So the lifestyle bundle is really, it took over, I think, forever in 2023. And again, that will play out into the future.
Okay. So do you feel like the industry is growing up and a lot of these transformations in 2023 were sort of necessary, right, for the industry to kind of get back on track or grow, focus more on profits. We all know in previous years there was a massive land grab for content and just pushing stuff out there, trying to, acquire eyeballs any way possible. And then that kind of came crashing to the reality that you still have boards and you've got Wall Street and they have expectations. So I look at that overall as sort of healthy change, creative destruction type of thing. Are there any things that didn't quite work their way out in 2023 that are sort of unresolved in your mind?
Well, I think the big traditional media companies tried to cut their way to a new business model this year. And to a certain extent, I think you're right. They're right sizing for the business that they're going to have, not the business they had. But what they fail to see is what I was just talking about. In the last era of media, in the golden era of television that created Mad Men and Sopranos and all that, the pay TV bundle was protected by an outer shell of broadband and mobile triple play services into the home.
Yep.
That has been replaced. It doesn't need to be replaced. It has been replaced by Prime, Amazon Prime, and the combination of devices and services that Apple provides and the suite of services, gaming, music, video, that Google provides. Disney doesn't have that anymore. When they went from wholesale to direct to consumer and accelerated the demise of the larger bundle, they did not factor in the fact that they can't replace dollar for dollar the ad subscription model because it wouldn't make sense alone. It only makes sense as part of a larger suite of services, which it was unprofitable, yet a marketing hook for the triple play in the last era. Unprofitable for Amazon, unprofitable for Apple, unprofitable for Google, but part of a much software in a much larger flywheel than Disney or Netflix or Spotify or any of the competitors, or even to a certain extent, Nintendo or Epic can supply on their own.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the reason you probably did the media universe to begin with. And I think for me, there were so many insights coming out of that is all the different, these conglomerations of different business models trying to capture the full sort of continuum of consumer behavior, gaming and social and video and it really is pretty amazing when you think about it, especially when you look at the younger generations, how different they are as an animal from us, boomers. How is that going to change in the future? Are those sort of, shifts in consumer behavior only going to get more sort of exacerbated in 2024? Maybe we're kind of moving into our predictions for 2024
Yeah,
now.
yeah. So one of the big predictions is that the big tech Death Stars get starrier next year. And you're exactly right. So 2023, well, my big thesis for 2023 is that we left the last era of media 4 years ago when Disney went direct to consumer and all of the rest of traditional media followed them, chasing Netflix towards a business model that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And it works for Netflix, but kind of, but it's a pretty mature television business and it doesn't spin off the same level of profits that the previous era.
But by not working, you mean it doesn't work as a model for the entire industry?
Correct.
Okay. There's not enough crumbs to, okay.
And as I said, the economics around video as a subscription service by itself don't work long term for an entire industry, which is exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
The big thesis I had for 2023 was that we left the last era of media in 2019 when Disney went direct to consumer and all of traditional media chased them down the rabbit hole towards Netflix, which turns out to be a business model that didn't work. Doesn't work for an industry-wide collection of companies. But what happened was we entered the user-centric era then. And this year, I talked at length about why we have been in the user-centric era for 4 years and how different the models need to be here. Two companies, the mobile phone that we all use, 7 billion consumers on the face of the earth, is now the remote control that all consumers use to control their media services. They can change that on a moment's notice, on a whim, with a swipe of their thumb in the system settings, right? That new mode does not work in the traditional media ecosystem. It only works if you're a big tech Death Star and can offer a suite of services where you always keep your relationship constant. So next year, big tech will only solidify its power. And frankly, the old school media players, with some exceptions, are either going to have to figure out a way to bundle themselves inside big tech or add new services to compete with big tech.
So by user-centric, you mean there's been a shift from kind of like broadcast and the media properties kind of dictating to the consumer their choices to now because you got the mobile right here, the consumer has the power and they can quickly jump to different services. They kind of control their environment instead of more passively just receiving whatever's offered to them.
Well, think about it. ESPN and the suite of Disney channels, ABC, all of the Disco Brother channels, all the Paramount channels, all the NBC Universal channels, they were bundled together and the consumer could choose to unplug from the whole thing, but couldn't choose individual channels for the most part. HBO, sure. But for the most part, did not have that kind of flexibility. Certainly didn't have the flexibility of YouTube TV, which enables you to reorder the channels however you want. And certainly not the ability to cancel any one channel at any time. The biggest existential crisis facing these companies as they move their model from pay TV to DTC is the ability for every user to deselect them every month. Churn has increased 25, 30% in the last year. And what this means is users across the planet are going to have 2, 3 premium subscription services at any moment in time, just not the same 3 every month. They're going to interchange them depending on what's on the different services at what time of year. And right now, the most common type of subscriber is the serial churner. I sign up for, this is probably everyone other than Netflix is seeing this. I sign up for one thing, I watch that one thing, and then I cancel before the next billing cycle. That doesn't happen in a bundle where Prime Video and free home delivery coexist. That doesn't happen in an ecosystem where Apple TV Plus and Apple Music came with your iPhone when you spent $1,000 on it. That doesn't happen in an ecosystem where you get a Xumo TV, broadband, and mobile. Those types of bundles are where we were. And I think this is the big missing point. We were there for 30 some odd years, 20 some odd years, right? It was a very good business, high margins. We are headed back there again. Prime is the best example, but Apple One And whatever Google and Microsoft come up with are going to be future versions of this.
So the consumer behavior is more spontaneous. It's more democratic. We mentioned, let's
And
talk
yet
about,
they still want the convenience of a bundle, which is why
yes.
no one breaks up with Amazon Prime. So we cherish our freedom, we cherish this power, but very often we will trade that out, like our privacy, for
Mhm.
convenience or savings.
So I saw some research. I think it was Maggot Associates that did some research on churn, and their premise was there's good churn, there's bad churn. Some of the churners are very sophisticated; they'll come in and out. But if you offer good content after they binge whatever they wanted, they'll come back, right? They're very sophisticated, very adept. And then there's the bad churners that are kind of like, I'm writing you off. I don't like your content library. I don't like your user experience. I'm moving on to something better for me.
Yeah, the problem with the good churner is from a subscription standpoint, you can expect them back. So there's a real lifetime value over 2 years. You can say the lifetime value is this. If they subscribe for 12 of the 24 months, that's their lifetime value.
Mhm.
That's the Magid premise. And I
Yeah.
get that. The problem is these services cannot and will not survive by subscription alone. They're all adding advertising.
Okay.
And if a subscriber comes and goes month after month, the lack of consistent viewing is really a detriment to the ad product. That's what Netflix is having problems with. Their view, first of all, they just don't have anybody on their ad tier, but the
It's growing
inconsistency.
though. I mean, to their defense, it seems like it's grown, maybe not quite to expectations. I don't. You've got better data than I do,
Well,
Evan. So,
they like to confuse the data. They like to put a fog of war into the data conversation. So
okay.
in May, they announced they had 5 million monthly active users, which is kind of like having a lemonade stand as far as an ad sales platform goes. They just recently announced with their new head of ad sales, who's never worked in ad sales before, said that they had 15 million monthly active users. If you assume 2.5 people per household on a Netflix subscription, these are
Okay.
not new subscribers who have left the house, but people who live in the home. That's about 5 million subscribers, which is around 2.5% of their total worldwide subscription. By the way, if you had a website that had 15 million monthly active users, you wouldn't get through the lobby of any ad agency worth of salt in the industry,
Yeah.
right? It's not a real business, which is why they're not announcing their sales numbers, which is why they just fired their head of ad sales, which the traffic was not her fault, by the way. But crucially, they've replaced their head of ad sales with somebody who understands content acquisition,
Yeah.
packaging and pricing, and the Netflix platform better than probably anyone in or outside the company. So I do think they're understanding that it's not a sales problem, it's a product problem. And I think they're going to try to address that in 2024. If they can, because they have the lowest churn in all of SVOD and
Hmm.
all of streaming, if they can manage to deal with their use programming and pricing to create their usage problem. Their problem now isn't a product problem, it's a usage problem.
Hmm.
And the usage problem is because there's nothing on the product to watch
Hmm.
and the pricing isn't good. If they fix that in 2024, then advertising will turn into a meaningful revenue stream for them by the end of 2025. If they do not fix that in the first half of 2024, it will be a very bad year for Netflix.
Interesting. I think the data I was looking at
That's
wasn't
one of my predictions for 2024.
okay. That's fair. That's fair. I think the data I was looking at wasn't total number of ad-based subscribers or ad-based viewers. It was the percentage of new that were signing up for the free
True.
service, and it looked. I can't remember the numbers, but it looked fairly impressive. And then you had to also look geographically outside the United States, where there's a lot of growth too. So
Well,
I know you crunch the numbers.
there's an element. So in 2023, Netflix managed to grow their subscriber base pretty substantially
Mhm.
because they migrated a bunch of people from sharing passwords to
Yes.
their own account. That pool of available consumers that they're converting, which they're rolling out, by the way, they did not do it all at once, which was very smart because it kind of eased them into the ecosystem and gave them growth throughout the year to talk about. That pool of consumers is coming to an end. There are
Mhm.
only so many password sharers that you can convert. And so by the middle of next year, they'll have run through that cycle and they're going to be looking for growth from somewhere else. If they can solve their usage problem as they lead into the new fronts and upfronts, and they can
Mhm.
convince advertisers to come back after they really got screwed on guarantees,
Mhm.
right? They gave money back
I know that was
last.
crazy. Yeah.
So if they can at least show signs of real growth month on month, quarter on quarter in the first half of next year, because they fixed their usage problem, then they can turn their advertising product into meaningful revenue in the next 24 months. If they do not, they're going to miss that window over the course of the first half of this year, and it's
Mhm.
going to be very problematic for them at the end of next year.
Okay.
By the way,
All
one of
right.
the way I've changed my predictions is there's two different outcomes here. If they fix this, this works. If they don't, this happens. And so I'm giving myself two options on every
Oh, you're
prediction.
hedging. All right. We'll see where it ends up a
Yeah.
year from now.
Well,
But
this
I mean,
happens. So
yeah, that's good. So it's been a weird year. Like, can you draw many conclusions or predict much based on what happened this year because of the writer strike, because of just some of the, I don't know, it's like the awkward teenage years, or do you have
yeah.
to kind of, ignore a lot of what happened this year? Because some of it was catching up, some of it was
Well,
just
there.
didn't work.
Yeah. It's there's only so much you can kind of predict based on an anomaly, right?
Yeah.
Which is why everyone failed to predict what would happen after lockdown. All
Yes.
of big tech and all of big media failed horrifically, which is why there have been so many job losses in both areas. Way different than the rest of the economy. Tech and media have been shedding jobs to the tens of
Hmm.
thousands, while the rest of the economy is adding jobs. And that is because from everyone from Amazon to Warner Brothers all misread the numbers from lockdown. What you can do though, so the strike year is another one of those anomalies.
Hmm.
However, the content shift was happening in big media prior to the strikes. Money was leaving scripted
Hmm.
and leaving many at bats to go to bigger, more mainstream products, especially sports. So money is moving out of the rest of programming and into sports. Look at Netflix. Look at where they've made some really big bets of late. The quarterback show, the F1 show, a ton of other
Hmm.
live sports competitions they're going to have next year. So they're moving into the sports space, even though they don't want to invest in sports rights.
Hmm.
But then Apple and Amazon and Google all stampeding into
Big time.
sports
Yep.
as well. So I think you're going to see the NBA. The NBA negotiations are up in March. They start in March. I have a hard time understanding how the cheapest people on earth, John Malone and David Zaslav, justify paying 4 times what they're paying now for NBA rights. I
Is
can't
that what
see
they're
how
asking for? Four
that's
times?
what they're going to get.
Oh, wow.
That's what they're going to get.
Wow.
Especially after this mid-season tournament just did really well. They're going to get 3 to 4x, somewhere between 3 and 4x. And they're going to get that because Apple is going to bid on it. Whether they get it or not, they're
Hmm.
going to drive up the price. Amazon is going to bid on it. Google's going to bid on it. Whether they get it or not, they're going to bid up the price.
Yep.
Disney can't afford to lose it. And so we'll see. And the answer to that conundrum, whether Discovery, Warner Brothers Discovery, Disco Brothers pays for the NBA or not, will pretty much predict the outcome of Disco Brothers themselves.
Hmm.
It's either the very end of the end or the beginning of a potential new chapter.
Hmm.
If Apple winds up with it, everything goes crazy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing I think you can predict is that money will continue to move into bigger, broader bets, and especially around sports, the content money.
Well, sports is one of those tent poles that you get the guaranteed eyeballs. It's water cooler conversation. It's got, it sort of permeates throughout the industry through social, everything. Is that healthy for the industry though? Like, I mean, to overpay for content, isn't that part of the problem? Like we're trying to fix as an industry?
Yeah, I don't. I really don't mind it inside my
Okay.
Amazon Prime subscription. I doubt very much if I'm a YouTube TV subscriber that I'm going to really notice the price increase all that much. And because these big tech companies can afford to lose money on TV and sports rights as they amortize it, the Black Friday Thursday night football game, which was a big shopping event,
Yep.
that's where we're headed. And so you don't need the rights themselves to be passed along, the cost for them to be
Hmm.
passed along directly to the consumer, as long as the consumer also shops and listens to music and buys the television set and does all these other things.
Hmm.
So no, I don't. I think it will actually create a better ecosystem that can actually afford to pay for the sports rights without having to always, which is what happened in cable,
Hmm.
always pass it directly on to the consumer. Also, I think you're going to see the interaction between sports and advertising change as well. And look at YouTube TV, YouTube Sunday Ticket ads. Look at Thursday Night Football ads for how sports as a whole package of advertising, I think, will change dramatically over the next couple of years.
Okay, so that's one of your big predictions. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because this happens to every industry, it seems like we're seeing a acceleration of the collapse of the middle. The big guys get bigger. The folks that are super serving sort of niche communities, they'll do okay. They'll carve it out. They'll stay lean. But if you're somewhere in the middle, trying to serve all things to all people, and you're not profitable, that doesn't bode well for you next year, right?
No, especially if you're not profitable. And I
Yeah.
think, this was the year everybody had to strive for profitability by making cuts. The problem is one of the things that happened in 2023 was revenue shrank or slowed. For Disney, it went, so for Warner Brothers Discovery, it went down. For
Hmm.
Disney and Paramount, it kind of flattened out. And so you can only cut so far before you destroy the entire growth value of the enterprise
Hmm.
itself. And so I don't know that I don't the to your point, the middle is going to be a
Hmm.
very hard place to be.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see transactions around Disco Brothers and Paramount and Fox, potentially even Disney as a result of that. I don't see anyone at the top of Disney saying, "Hey, let's run this company up that hill and really take on the big boys and win."
Let's
I don't
let's
see
raise theme park ticket prices. It's like,
this is managing for a sale at this point.
yeah. So
I think that
we're kind of dancing around it, but like, is that one of your predictions? M&A activity in 2024? Like, what big
yeah.
mergers would you expect?
It's very, I don't, what I want to happen or what I think should happen, I don't know that it will.
Okay.
Because oftentimes it's the bankers and the people getting the bonuses who make these decisions, not the data or the strategy.
And interest
However,
rates have an effect too. So yeah.
correct. So I think definitely Paramount sells next year. I think Apple should buy them
Hmm.
rather than buying any of the other bigger companies. Because I think I don't think there's any regulatory issues there.
Hmm.
They can afford it without really even blinking. And the intellectual property, including sports, that comes along with that
Hmm.
package, but especially Nickelodeon, is completely undervalued by a factor of two. And
Hmm.
even at 20 or $30 billion, it's a steal for a company like Apple. I don't think anyone should ever buy Warner Brothers Discovery again. I think it's a bad luck charm. And I think whatever happens, I think they will sell in the next 24 months. And I
Hmm.
think you're going to see the disappearance of the Warner Brothers, HBO, CNN, Discovery, TLC, HGTV brands as a result of that.
Can
And
you
that's
believe that all those you mentioned, those are powerhouse brands? What
the
happened?
only things that will probably survive the next melting of that complete ice cube
Hmm.
is the DC universe, Harry
Hmm.
Potter, maybe HGTV.
Hmm.
And that's about, and Warner Brothers will come back in Space Jam reboots every few years.
Yeah.
So but that's about it. And that's a real shame. I think someone will buy Spotify in the next 12 to 18 months. They
Hmm.
desperately need it to happen because they cannot compete against Apple and Alphabet and Amazon, three of the largest companies in the history of mankind.
Hmm.
And Daniel Ek continues to demonstrate that he doesn't understand how to manage that business model. I think someone should buy Disney and put them out of their misery, frankly.
Wow.
And I think Apple is the most Apple is the most likely buyer there. But I think Microsoft, comes along and makes a play, and you could see Disney making a play depending on what happens. Sorry, Google making a
Yep.
play depending on what happens. But yeah, there's no idea at the top of that company anymore. It is literally, it feels like a garage sale.
Hmm.
And it's a shame.
Yeah, the last 3 years, some of these once great giants are just struggling to figure out a strategy to kind of dig out. So we covered a lot of ground here. We talked about M&A. We talked a little bit about consumer behavior. sort of predictions you'd make that maybe are non-intuitive for next year that in
I think
terms of
it's one that people, it's not sexy, perhaps. It's also kind of, I think the advertising economy is something that not a lot of people understand how central it is to all aspects of the media universe, including big tech.
Mhm.
Amazon's ad business basically saved its butt over the last 2 years. It's the fastest growing segment of Amazon, but it's also the fastest growing ad platform on the planet. And I think that represents a kind of unsexy prediction, but that data is going to be now the main point of every ad deal for the next number of years, if not forever. It's not going to be the content, and this is going to make some people upset. It's not going to be the specific content as much as it's going to be the data, which
Mhm.
data, how that data is used, what success looks like. We are migrating from a brand first advertising ecosystem to one where business outcomes are the primary objective, and how success will be measured. So it's not how many eyeballs did I reach,
Mhm.
how many business outcomes did I affect, the cost per action as opposed to the cost per thousand sets of eyeballs. And so 2024 is going to be the year where identity and currency and measurement become central to every single deal that's made in the new front
Mhm.
and the upfronts. And I think that started last year, and I don't think everybody understands how seismic a shift that is.
Mhm.
Because we're really going to move this year from Nielsen as the currency that everybody talks
Mhm.
about, and they hate it, and there are some other alternatives, to every deal will have some different kind of currency in it. Nielsen will be there, but so will a bunch of others and different kinds of measurement. And how my data commingles with your data
Mhm.
in a way that predicts outcomes is really going to be much more central to every deal and every relationship between advertiser and platform on a moving forward basis. So
Yeah,
it's
it's not just so simple
sexy.
as
Yeah,
it's
go
not
ahead.
sexy, but I agree with you. I think the data is very important. I did a focus group of some younger people, and it was really interesting. Some of the top shows were like Suits and The Office still. And so it's not like you just build it, invest billions in content, and suddenly you get your advertisers and your subscribers. The data potentially will tell you, hey, there's a great there's some content here you can dust off, draw a lot of viewers, right? Maybe not
Well, and
forever, but
crucially, all the agencies, all the DSPs, I'm sorry, all the
brands.
sellers,
Yeah, okay.
all the platforms, all the brands, all the demand side sellers, have so much data to commingle
Hmm.
to not only target better demos where they may not be found, but otherwise be found, but also to follow those consumers through the entire impression journey to completion and
Hmm.
predict outcomes based on pockets of consumers and pockets of content in a way that we've never been able to before. Not because they have the same demo that you're targeting, but because they look just like the customers you already have. And we
Hmm.
can predict that because we're mixing them in a clean room and then going out into the marketplace with a commingled set of data. That's a completely different set of sciences than we've been operating in even today in
Hmm.
television.
Yeah,
And
it's not just creative, it's data scientists. So we're kind of leading to something. This is a big theme in the OTT Executive Summit last week is AI. We got to talk about it. Big theme of 2023. Everybody's talking about it, both its detrimental impacts as well as, its cost-cutting potential, personalization. Are the machines going to be a big helper in 2024? And how do you think that might impact some of the things we've already talked about?
I think there's one part of me who wants to say we've been working in an AI ecosystem for many, many years.
Hmm.
Meta, Google, Amazon, but even the New York Times operate their backbones on machine learning, large learning, neural network, AI.
Hmm.
That if you've ever tried to kind of cancel a subscription at the New York Times, you'll see it in action
I
in real
know.
time. Tons of Gen AI is being
Yeah.
used in chatbots on platforms right now.
Hmm.
So it's already there and it's already in our operating system. Secondarily, I do think it's primarily going to be additive. It's going to take waste out of the ecosystem. It's going to create much more flexible models
Hmm.
around the consumer themselves. So rather than kind of coming in and having an algorithm kind of guess what you want to watch, every experience you go into in FAST and AVOD and SVOD is going to be personalized for you, from the content that's presented to you to the ads that you'll see. And that's going to make the experience for the consumer, discovery, context, the ad continuum, the amount of ads, the repetition of ads, all better. And there's no way that humans can improve it at the rate we've demonstrated. We have a paradox of choice in the ecosystem. Discovery absolutely sucks. The experiences are not nearly as personalized as they should be. Ad repetition is a huge problem, especially on connected television. And it's much more difficult for me to see a product and transact on it than it absolutely should be, given that I'm sitting in the room with two devices actively connected to the same Wi-Fi network. Like, we can't fix it by ourselves. We've proven that.
Right.
AI and Gen AI will, if we let it and we lean into it in the correct way, it will fix the discovery and UX problem that we have from a consumer side in the industry. It will also make way more efficient and effective the buy side, the media buyer side, who won't move more money more quickly to CTV because it sucks as a data tool, as an experience, the frequency and overreach of ads, all of those things that we know are a problem. And so I think we have to look at it as a real opportunity for success in the personalization on both ends of the media ecosystem. On the creative side, I think there's this irrational belief that these machines are going to take over all of our writing and directing and acting jobs. And there is definitely a danger that the people who mismanage the strike will try to do that. But OpenAI just learned how to add 2 + 2. Their ChatGPT just learned that. I think the threat of the Matrix is not as great as the opportunity to use Gen AI for an independent filmmaker to make a $100 million looking film, for writers to imagine different universes because they have access to better research than they ever could have had before, for animators to compete with Disney and Nickelodeon without having to spend years and ask their parents to keep giving them money. So I think every era laments the arrival of new technology. But in the end, content gets more democratized. And I think that's one of the outcomes that will come. And the ecosystem usually does improve itself because of the power of new technology. That said, the idiots in Washington have to learn how to better regulate technology. They have failed on social media. They have failed on big tech. They're going to fail on AI. And if we do not start electing people who understand technology, that's the great risk. That is the big risk that I think we face.
Yeah, and there's over-regulation, there's under-regulation too. They got to get they got to get smart
the
about
right
it.
regulation. I didn't say over-regulation. You know what I mean? Like, to a certain extent, Section 230 is an example of over-regulation, not under-regulation.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to understand the effect that the decisions made in DC have on the lives of every child we will ever bear. And we did a study on data privacy. Most adults in the US do not understand who's collecting their data on a daily basis and how it's used. 2/3 of American adults don't understand that. That is a major failure of our society. And if you don't understand what a cookie is and why you keep getting asked about it, that is the big danger in AI, is that we're going to just replicate that same set of mistakes we've made in social media and in big tech over the last 40 years.
Yeah, and the problem with the beauty of AI is it accelerates that learning process. And if you've got something messed up kind of baked into it, it's just going to magnify that, right, on a grander scale.
Right. That's
so you got to figure it out now. But I agree in general, AI, like, someone gave me an example, like, you could have a toddler write 100, or take a crayon, and 1 out of 10,000 might be an interesting painting or something like that, right? Was that you that said that? I don't know. Every now and then I quote somebody.
It's a good analogy, though.
That was me. But that you could do that times, 100, and now you have 100 good scripts to start with, right? As a writer, to kind of like, okay, the machine that's kind of interesting ideas. So the humans need to be curators.
the best pieces of writing that I've gotten back from Chat GPT have been ones where I enter in 100 to 500 words to
Mhm.
start
Okay.
and ask it to say, expand this, open this up, do some research in this area. That it's a brush, not a canvas. It's not a
Good.
finished painting. It is another tool for us to use as artists and creators. The biggest use case is going to be in boring back office stuff that humans should not be doing in the first place.
Right.
We there are things we ask technology to
The
do because
tedious stuff, right? Let the
it's
machines
just
do
not a
that.
real job,
Yeah.
and we're asking people to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again is bad for their brains.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Okay, well, listen, we're almost out of time. For 2024, I know you're really good at crunching the numbers. You'll look at a financial report and I like to do that stuff too. I'm kind of wired that way. Let's just, close with your investor's hat on. Is 2024 going to be a good year to invest in the media and entertainment market? Let's leave it open-ended.
I would say the same thing I said at the end of last year that turned out to be really well, which is invest in those 6 companies I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, and you pretty much can't go wrong. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. I can't believe I'm saying that. Nvidia, Alphabet. Those companies I don't think are going to go anywhere but up next year.
Hmm.
And even with regulation, Google just got regulated. I would also say that there's a bit of a bubble around AI right now. So be careful in that
Okay.
space. I think that people are overextending themselves. I think it's a very rational bet to make long term.
Hmm.
But the prices and the multiples that are out there today, especially around the prices of chips themselves,
Hmm.
that feels like a bit of a bubble to me. So I would be a little bit wary of that. I think lastly, what I would say is look for companies that have a diversified revenue stream. The
Hmm.
New York Times is a pretty safe bet.
Hmm.
They have gaming, they have audio, they have advertising, they have subscription, they have food, they have sports. They have a really nice product, and it doesn't depend on 100 million subscribers. It depends on 10 to 15 million subscribers. Find more companies like that that I think are going to offer you an opportunity. Nintendo has had a real, I mean, it's on a different stock exchange, but it's had a really good year. It's a family-run business that is really going to expand the adaptations of its intellectual property as a new revenue stream. They had Mario Brothers this year. They have Legends of Zelda coming up. So I like them oddly as a standalone gaming company because I think they understand how to. I think they're just beginning their diversified revenue cycle. So those would be specific advice I would give from an investing
Well, that's
standpoint.
great. So even if the industry, doesn't learn the lessons of the past and struggles, we can still make some money on, some of these
Yeah. That's
these
exactly right.
changes as investors. Well, listen, Evan, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. We've done what, 30 podcasts this year, starting with you and ending with you. And I'm bullish on 2024 for the record. I've told other people this. I think we've got ad spending coming in. I think some of the, companies have figured things out and are on a growth path. We've seen, prices rise. So we've seen better profitability. A lot of bets still to be made, and it's going to be an interesting industry to be part of in 2024. So, and
Totally.
Evan, we'll keep looking at your predictions, your media universe, and thank you for being you.
Thanks so much.
All right, have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Signing off once again. This is Brian Mahoney with OTT Executive Podcast, joined today by Evan Shapiro. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.